All right, Kaveri, where to go? Have a good session.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to a special edition of E-Expressions with the New Indian Express. I have with me four gentlemen who know exactly what was happening when India seemed to be not moving at all. They were the people who were sort of oiling the wheels and making India move against enormous odds and keeping the lifelines of India going. It's a particular pleasure for me to introduce all of them and my editorial director, Mr. Prabhu Chawla. Welcome. There's Mr. Vineet Agarwal. He's the ASSOCHAM president as well as the MD, the Transport Corporation of India. Mr. Kalsi, Executive Board Member, Maruti. Mr. Sukanta Das, Chief Logistics Officer, Hindalco Industries. And Mr. Srihari Icharapu, he's the CEO of Cargo Exchange. And Mr. Chawla, as I said. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. This is an industry that has seen an enormous growth in the last 18 months. At least it's under enormous focus, and one of the few industries that seems to have survived the general slowdown in the economy. So gentlemen, I'd like to begin with Mr. Agarwal, if I may, right away, and really talk about this new normal world that we're living in, and how does he see the growth for logistics service providers and warehouse service providers in this extremely challenging environment? Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Kaveri. Thank you, Mr. Chawla. It's a pleasure to be here today. This is an exciting session because we're going to talk about a lot of areas related to logistics and essentially, as you rightly said, the wheels of the economy. Even during the pandemic and as we go through the pandemic, the most important source of real, I would say, comfort also, other than the medical fraternity, has been the fact that you're able to get everything to the medical fraternity or to your homes or to shops, etc. I think the fact that a lot of the service providers in the logistics space have really put up a brave front to go out during the peak, during the time in March, April last year, when no one really knew what was happening. But they braved it out in the front. They made deliveries to our homes, and they have really stood up as the COVID warriors of our country. So the fact is that there is a major disruption that's happening because of the pandemic, whether it is not just in the regular industries, but also in our industry, which is the logistics and supply chain industry. There is a shift towards omni-channel. For example, people not just buying from stores, but also from online commerce or going back to stores when lockdowns open. To the fact that supply chains are becoming a lot more domestic, or perhaps they want to reduce the kind of the pressure that used to be there. Nobody wants to lose sales. So which meant that companies have to change the way that they're looking at their inventory, for example. And also the fact that when you had issues with road transport, other modes of transport picked up, rail picked up, coastal shipping picked up. So these are far-reaching and dramatic changes that have started to happen because of the changes to industry, to the logistics industry as well. And all the service providers have gone through challenging times. Some of them continue to go through challenging times. But the opportunity, the fact that there is a growth that's in the inherent growth opportunity in India is massive. And that will drive this industry forward as well.
Absolutely, Mr. Agarwal, you said it right, that they were the silent, and all of you really were the silent heroes during this time. I mean, when people were so scared, of what was happening, we saw the logistics chain, the warehousing, institutions as well, doing their best to keep everything going. Mr. Kalsi, may I bring you in here and talk about the state of the logistics and supply chain in this post-pandemic world? How do you see it? And what really is happening to the global supply chain, specifically, I believe, due to the shortage of microchips?
This pandemic, brought in new challenges, and at the same time, those challenges brought some new opportunities as well, because certain things we had to do under compulsion, which otherwise would have taken a longer time to actually adopt. And there were certain things which in the course of routine, we followed. Now here, the point was that the first, phenomena that we observed was that from the government side, there was a very fast response when the lockdowns were there and fleets were moving or they were allowed to move on road. And if there were any issues arising there during that time, we could immediately get those issues resolved. That is one thing. And second thing is when we talk about, say, global impact, then there were certain ports which were closed, and still there are certain ports which are closed. So there was huge congestion on these ports. Some of the ports, were totally closed. Some were operating partially, and also because of this, the containers were held up at various locations. And as a result of this, there is a great shortage of containers even now. And what we are facing today is an increase in the freight rates of, say, sea shipments. Also, there are delays in terms of, say, movement of these cargoes from the sea routes. So this is one major challenge which we are facing post-pandemic. And also, one more thing I would like to say here is that consumer goods and retail market, this is almost, half of the size of total logistics market. Now, this got a big boost because, people were not allowed to move, or they were not moving because of lockdowns. So movement of these goods was very, very important, particularly the consumer goods, even consumer durables, and the doorstep delivery, which led to, invent of, say, last minute, logistics movement. So there has been a boom in that as well. And I think moving forward, that is going to continue. And also it has generated, new avenues for employment of the people who are associated with these last mile deliveries. And also there has been a huge emphasis on the, say, omni-channel logistics, as Mr. Vineet also mentioned. There has been a focus on cold chains, as the medical, equipments, medicines, injections, etc., had to be moved at a certain temperature only. Similarly, fruits, vegetables. So even for the cold chains, it has been a big opportunity to fructify. And moving forward, I think cold chains, which was a weak area for us, that will also get a good momentum. So these are some of the areas which immediately on the top of mind, I can say that post-pandemic, there would be these changes in the logistics environment.
Absolutely. Mr. Das, may I bring you in here and talk about really just taking forward what Mr. Kalsi talked about, the rise in costs. You've seen that, and of course also the spread. The last mile connectivity also meant, going deeper into tier 2, tier 3 cities, where perhaps expansion had not taken place. And this not only meant huge opportunities in terms of employment, and which increasingly we'll also have to look at reskilling of people to take care of that, but also, as Mr. Kalsi said, the whole idea of the cold chain, which is quite an area of concern in India. How do you see the challenges as well as the opportunities?
Well, I think in terms of our type of industry, which is metals and manufacturing, particularly, got impacted like any other industry during the pandemic. One, the demand side was because of the economy, and the supply side with suppliers shutting shop. But the biggest problem was that being a part of the continuous process industry, we have to keep our refineries and smelters running throughout. So which meant that we not only had to feed the basic raw materials to the factories, but also had to evacuate all the produce.
Right.
And that any which ways our factories, if you know, are remotely located, which are more nearer to near the mines. So any which way, it's a complex operation there. But with the lockdown in place, it became a logistical nightmare per se. So what did we do? On the supply side, we tried to diversify as well as localize our suppliers. And on the logistics side at Hindalco, we anyway use a variety of transport solutions. Like we have long distance conveyor belts, we have ropeways. Apart, these are internal to us, and then external, of course, the railways and the road network, apart from the coastal movement as well. So what we did during the pandemic was we continued to evaluate and utilize the best available modes. And we made maximum use of railways. In fact, during the peak lockdown, we kind of used 100% of railways to evacuate our stuff. And post the initial phase of lockdown, we slowly went back to road movements for the shorter hauls and the last mile, which you mentioned. Our warehouses also were able to come back to full-scale capacity and operations after a brief period of stoppage. What we leveraged big time during this pandemic was our digital technologies, like the GPS, the IoTs of the world, to gain greater visibility, because that was the need of the hour. Also using our own logistics control tower, which we are able to analyze various insights in terms of performance and cost metrics, I would say. So while the external environment was tough, with operational challenges like movement restrictions and commercial challenges, like Mr. Kalsi mentioned about the shipping freights going up. So what we did was we kept looking inside, and we also tried to redesign and kind of our processes and tweak our processes in order to bring the operational efficiency. As we speak, we were able to reduce our spends on damages and detention to the score of 50 to 80%. But the biggest achievement, I would say, during that pandemic was to be able to ensure the seamless production across all our factories, and also achieve a higher amount of exports for us.
Oh, really? That's a wonderful thing. How did you manage the exports, the transportation of the exports?
So as I said, most of our factories, since they are located in the interiors, we had developed our own railway sidings for ourselves.
Okay.
So all exports are factory stuffed and moves to the ports directly by railway network. So that was taken care by the railways. And then on the ocean side, yes, in certain cases, we did have to pay higher freights, but then we were eventually able to evacuate those from the ports as well.
Right. So that's marvelous. I think, opportunity in adversity is one of the greatest skills that allows businesses to repivot and to actually re-energize themselves. So you seem to have done that really well. May I bring in Mr. Srihari Icharapu, because I think we're looking at technological innovations and cargo exchange seems to specialize in them. What really were the innovations that you were able to bring about that you're particularly delighted about in a very difficult time?
Thank you, ma'am. See, I just want to speak about because as Mr. Das and Mr. Kalsi and Mr. Agarwal has mentioned, the industry was going through tough times actually.
Right.
Right. And there was a huge pending digital disruption which was pending since long time in logistic industry. Whereas banking, insurance, every other sector were able to adopt, whereas logistic industry it took some time.
Why is that? Sorry, if I may ask.
It was like the age-old traditional ERPs the companies were using, and there was like more dependency on the people. The digital disruption didn't happen to much scale like 2015. The whole disruption started around 2015, and the digital solutions started picked up, and especially like with major clusters like digital LSP started coming up in the industry, like robotic warehouse automation started for smart picking and storage solutions. Next gen asset management solutions started coming up with respect to IoT, control tower solutions, or the data analytics or better decision making with respect to predictive and prescriptive analysis, right? So those kind of things has started the disruption in this particular industry. And it was about to disrupt, but at the same time, COVID also came, and actually that it actually accelerated the whole process, like maybe 2 to 3 years faster than what it was expected here. So I'll tell like one of the example is saying that in terms of digital transformation, so we were like working with Government of India for oxygen digital tracking system during the second wave of this COVID-19 actually, during the month of April to June actually. Right. So all of a sudden what happened, the spike happened from movement of oxygen happened from 900 metric ton to 9,000 metric ton. And this scale has to be managed. And without digital solution, the scale cannot be managed actually.
Right.
So that's where Kaveree Exchange actually has provided a complete transformation with our advisory solutions as well as our technology solutions. So we aggregated, we put a hyper agile methodology, and we aggregated all our microservices, and we are able to like pull the tracking of means the optimization of routes and allocation of oxygen to various states, and then how actually the oxygen moves from point A to point B with a real-time tracking. So this actually helped, and within 5 days.
Sorry, if I may just interrupt here. With whom did you coordinate in the government specifically? Was there a task force for this?
Yes, there was an empowered group too, which was under Ministry of Road Transport Highways and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology.
Okay. So they were telling you where there were extreme shortages and you were able to pivot the supply to those areas.
Absolutely. So the allocation is to come from their end, and we used to like move the trucks wherever required, because at that time the trucks are moving very sporadic, like some trucks are moving by train, some are coming back by airplane, and the things has to be properly structured. So everything was tracked, and 100% we brought it online using digital transformation within like 5 days for them.
Right. But of course, there was still so much of a gap in the supply.
Absolutely. So we were doing for the liquid oxygen. So again, we need to like plan for the at a cylinder level also actually. This
right. So now can that same technology also be used to ensure that the vaccine goes to the last man or last woman standing in India?
Absolutely. So that is the whole idea. So including like the cold chain solution, which will move the vaccine right from the production center to the distribution centers, like the major hospitals, and to the last mile of that particular thing. Everything can be traced. Even like solutions like blockchain has come up, which can record each and every step, what is the temperature the vaccine has been maintained and what temperature it has been given just before it has been given to a resource actually.
Can we ask you to hazard a guess by when do you think India will be vaccinated, most adult Indians?
It's like tough question for us, but yeah, definitely from a logistic perspective, we are ready.
Right. You're ready. What is the kind of numbers that we're looking at? In a day, how many vaccines can you get across to the whole of India, shall we say?
We can easily move with the current infrastructure, with the current cold chain availability and the current tracking, means the current digital solutions we have, we can easily do 10 to 15 millions of vaccines in a day actually.
Right. Wow. And how many are you doing currently?
Maybe around 2 million.
Okay. So there's that much of capacity that's been created in the ecosystem.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Right.
So, Kaveree, let me clear. Because 2 million is saying they are carrying the vaccine, but we are injecting much more than that. It means there are other agencies involved in supplying this vaccines to other agencies. But we are giving almost 4 million vaccine, more than 4 million every day. So there must be some other supplementary or additional facility being created, is it?
It can be a direct movement also might be happening. So that can be one of the chances.
You mean direct movement from the vaccine supplier to the vaccinated?
To the directly procurement to the hospitals actually.
Okay.
Private hospitals must be
private hospitals.
Right.
Yeah, but
right.
they need the same kind of equipment, even the transport, everything.
Yes.
Cold chain, everything requires the same quality, which has to be delivered to the private hospitals as well.
Absolutely. So it is the same process, but might be like by different people, actually, different places.
Right.
I'll go back to, because this is a very interesting subject.
Exactly.
And warehousing.
Yeah.
I have not been able to figure out as a student of economics and teacher of economics. So what does we include in terms of logistics? Can
Yeah.
somebody explain to me when you say logistics, what does it include? How many items, how many institutions, how many whatever? Anybody can explain to me that then we can discuss where the lacking, where the connectivity between various things are lacking. What do you increase in logistics? Warehousing, I know there is boundary walls, there are walls, and there is everything else. But logistics doesn't have a geographical or any defined architecture.
Right.
So perhaps Mr. Agarwal can take that question.
Yeah, sure. So logistics, the components of logistics, as Mr. Shah was asking, the components is basically transportation. So that could be all modes of transport: road, rail, air, sea, and even pipelines for that matter, or conveyors, as Mr. Das just mentioned. These are all modes of transportation. That is the bulk of what constitutes logistics. Then there is warehousing costs. There is handling costs. Handling is a big part. Packaging costs, that's also a big cost. Then there is inventory carrying cost, which is the cost of that inventory that's on the road or on the sea or whatever. And then there is the wastage that is there in the system, the losses that happen. So broadly, these are what components of logistics, as we call them, from a technical term.
Mr. Cost, I'm not looking at the cost, I'm looking at the activities involved, the action involved. You see, from the steaming boilers to the cold chain, the supply of products and whatever you want to sell. There are so many activities, as you have well defined, that one has to take from the factory to the trucker to the mobility from one station to another, from road to port, from airport to again road. These are various things involved. I really admire all of you that during the pandemic, the supply chain was not broken to that extent what was expected. India being a developing country, I think you are the invisible heroes which have been delivered, because we never felt shortage of anything.
Yeah.
There were shortages, obviously, but obviously this I was trying to understand the logistics involved. Therefore, all of us were well connected. I don't know how, who were the invisible hand or power who were connecting. Because I remember I'm going to Mr. Kalsi now, TCI must be older than me, but can't be, because ever since I've started journalism, I've heard TCI name. They must be owning trucks. How many trucks they own, I don't know now. But it's a famous name, household name, Transport Corporation of India. But Maruti, because I know, because invention is must in a logistic architecture. Because I remember Mr. Bachir, I don't know Mr. Kalsi remembers him or not, he was general manager in Maruti in early 80s when it started, and journalism must Bhargav. When I was Express editor at that time, he showed me a picture of a trawler. I asked him, Bachir, what are you doing? He said, now I'm going to transfer my Maruti car, 12 cars in one trawler, big trawler. Before that, India, we had never seen those kind of trucks carrying big cars in a way. So that was part of the logistic upgradation at that time. The similar things must have, and even TCI must have done something connecting drivers and truckers so they can track it down. So you have to train them, track them, and therefore the deliveries happen. What kind of problems you faced as logistics person in delivering your final product? I'll ask Mr. Agarwal, because he's the most difficult, because he's hiring so many drivers who are not trained, who are not tech savvy, but they have to be connected, because tracking of a product is very important now. When it moves from one station to another, tracking is much more important. Similarly, Mr. Kalsi is supplying over 2 lakh cars a month, or more than, not 2 lakh, 1 million cars almost going there. So how they track this? How you have made it so successful so far, and what are the difficulties you are still facing?
So I think I'll take your question in a different manner. I think tracking is one of the things. The importance of logistics is to get the right product at the right place, at the right price, at the right time, and at the right quantity. So this is what is the objective of logistics. Now, which would mean that there are lots of things that one needs to do to ensure that that happens, which includes the fact that there has to be a proper tracking. But notwithstanding, there are a lot of challenges also, and you highlighted one of them was the availability of drivers. The infrastructure in our country still requires a lot of work. For example, we did a study with IIM Calcutta about 5-6 years ago, where we found that the average speed of a truck was about 38, 40 kilometers per hour.
Yes.
So this really needs to go up. The modal mix in our country, it is 63% of our cargo moves by road today, which actually results in a very high cost for the product. Whereas in a place like China, it's only about 25, 30% that moves by road. So again, in terms of challenges, there are numerous challenges from an operational perspective, from a national competitiveness perspective, and definitely from the product requirement perspectives, where if you see something like, you'll see most cargo being handled through the head load. People are carrying the cargo. Palletization in our country is very low. Containerization is very low. So these are things that will evolve, and they started to evolve also in the last decade or so, that will ensure that the logistics in our country becomes more competitive. There's a number that the World Bank talks about called the LPI, the Logistics Performance Index. And India is, I think, in 2018, we were at 39, if I'm not mistaken, in the global rankings. We have certainly moved up, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, Mr. Kalsi, if you could respond. Yeah, sorry.
I think Mr. Chawla mentioned it very rightly. When we started our organization, in fact, I am associated with this company now almost for 37 years, ever since we started in 1983. So that was the time when we decided that we will deliver our cars in the factory fresh condition to our customers. So that's how the concept of carrying cars by trucks and trailers was envisaged by our top management at that point of time. And since then, we have been following it. Till then, the cars would be produced, say, somewhere in the western part of the country or eastern part of the country, and they'll be driven 1,000 kilometers to reach their destination. So that is where we started from. But having said that, we have come a long way since then, and technology has played its own role in that entire process. Today, we are having a fleet of more than, say, 12,000 trucks and trailers. And all these trucks and trailers, they are equipped with global positioning systems. And there is a central server on which the movement of these vehicles is monitored. And at any point of time, we can find out how many inbound vehicles are coming towards the plant and how many outbound vehicles are there and at what location they are. So this, gives us an assurance about the timely delivery, and also about the well-being of the vehicle as well as the drivers. Any en route mishap happening, immediately we get to know through our control room. That is where the technology is playing a role. Now, second thing, during the pandemic, we were able to track each and every vehicle, and in case they needed help, we could immediately get in touch with the driver or the supervisor there, and we could provide that help and mobilize that help. Similarly, if the trucks, trailers, they were stuck up somewhere, we could help them that which is the nearest parking spot where they can go. And also, in case they were stuck up for want of finance, technology played a role again through this thing, e-transfer of money. We could help those fellows. So that's what happened during the pandemic. Having said that, this is about the vehicles. Likewise, we were also moving our components. Today, we have 75,000 unique part numbers for our 25 models. And our target is that anywhere in the country, a vehicle should not go off-road for more than, say, 48 hours for want of a part. So we were able to meet those commitments even during the pandemic time. And thanks to our logistics partners there, and thanks to the technology platforms that we could create in advance, that helped us. Likewise, we have inbound logistics for our tools, for our raw material, consumables. For that also, there was a similar kind of a tracking system. And we were able to manage our supply chain in a very seamless manner. Then there were staggered lockdowns at various places, considering the fact that our components come from all parts of the country. Sometimes in Pune, Pimpri, Chinchwad, there was a lockdown, and rest of the country it was not. Sometimes at some other location there was a lockdown. So we had to manage through our proper efficient warehousing activities using, say, artificial intelligence, that we manage the inventories at the right place, at the right levels, And during pandemic, we had to review that entire process, and wherever this kind of problems were there, we had to create small warehouses around our plant so that we retain and maintain a buffer in case of any mishap or any say long lockdown happens at the supplier end, then we are able to manage that. So it was a fairly complex process, but with the help of technology and our say efficient logistics partners, we were able to manage that very well, I would like to say.
So, Mr. Kalsi, if I could just take forward that idea. So now all these, you were talking about these warehouses that you created, the smaller warehouses. Now, in a post-pandemic world, in the new normal as we are discussing, how will you be able to utilize or leverage this extra capacity that you've created? How will you be able to utilize that going forward?
Well, this was on a lease basis, so we did not buy real estate at that time or created a permanent, storage place. So it was on a very temporary basis with say wafer thin expenditures on that. And now, in case we don't need them, we will be able to exit that. So that was our understanding.
Right. Mr. Das mentioned the idea of containers, and he was saying that there's a global shortage of containers as well. Why do we, is that not something that manufacturing in India can look at as an opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's an opportunity, but then it has its own lead time. And lead time is quite long. And the current global manufacturers are overburdened at this point. And hence it is in short supply. Basically what has happened is first it started with the economic boom, and then all of a sudden this pandemic happened. What happened was the entire containers got concentrated in one region, and that was mostly towards China. And what happened was post this revival, though China came back, but the other parts of the world didn't. Hence, that movement of those containers were still constrained in one zone.
Right.
So that created this supply and demand imbalance, which is happening and resulting into started with container issues. It resulted into vessels skipping their port calls because they didn't have business. And third, of course, these both resulted into skyrocketing of these freights. So that's the situation we are in currently. And I think what is going to happen now in the near future is both. One, but it has to be very slow because it can't be happening overnight. And one, vessels will get increased. Second, the containers will come back in the system. So we expect that to now taper it in at least 1 or 2 quarters more.
Is that not something?
Can I add, Kaveri, that actually container manufacturing has started now again in India. In fact, the government, ASSOCHAM had recommended this to the government, and they took it up. And in fact, the first order was placed on a company called Breathweight and BHEL as well. And a few other companies have now started to explore this opportunity because 95% of our containers are coming from China. Right. So I think it's a big opportunity, as you rightly mentioned. But yes, there is a lead time, surely.
Right. And we were also talking about vessels. Mr. Das talked about vessels. Is that an opportunity that India can look at, or again, there's a lead time there? Mr. Agarwal?
So yeah, well, vessels is very difficult to build. It requires a lot of capabilities. The shipyards in India have started doing some of that. It's a very capex intensive industry, and it also goes through a lot of cycles. So one has to be really have to think very, very long term. I know companies like L&T, etc., do that. So there is a definite potential. But at this point in time, I do not see that really realizing that in India to that extent as much as we can see the industry established in places like Korea or Japan or China or even in the European countries.
Mr. Agarwal, may I just stay with you for a moment longer? And the figure that you mentioned is quite fascinating, that 63% of the load in India is still by road. And in China, when you look at it's what, 25%. So we for so long we've heard about inland waterways, and we've been hearing that this will finally take off. What are the things that you feel can take the load off road in India?
See, the one which the network is already created, the capacity just needs to be channeled properly, is railways. We have the best, amongst the best networks in the world with the railways. We have a lot of wagons and so on and so forth, except they need to be available at the right time at the right place. So that's one sector that can really take that burden off the roads towards rail. And then subsequently, the coastal shipping, India has a massive coastline, but the development of coastal shipping has been quite weak again in the last, now of course it has started developing more and more. And inland waterways is a little far out, I think. It's got a lot of limitations at this point. So I would think that if the government's focus or even companies' focus are on these two areas, the railways as well as the sea coastal side, we should ease the burden from the roads.
Right.
Let me go back in history, because when I spoke to P.C. Sethi when he was there in 1980, and the railway minister Pandey at that time, I think railway was carrying much more than what road transport was carrying. It was the reverse, I think. And they told us, okay, we must develop the road transport, therefore take off the railway. But now we are going reverse now. Am I right, Mr. Agarwal?
Actually, no, sir. It was railways never got to that stage, but they were around the 40-50% range.
Correct. 50%.
In the 60s, 70s, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they wanted, because the rail has not grown as much as the road transport has gone in terms of vehicle production, in terms of whatever you look at it. The road transport has grown faster, but in a developing economy, as you rightly pointed out, cost of road transport is much higher than the railways. And that is what is looking for, therefore. And the coastal, we have a coastal from Gujarat going upward to West Bengal and whatever. We could have used the coastal area, movement of factories are around these areas only, and they could have moved from this place to and waterways could have been developed. What I want to say now, if you are saying on the basis of LPI, you are number 39 at the moment, and we have to move up. I would request all of you to give me a suggestion so that we can record that. What are the 5 different things? What are the difficulties you are facing? And if I have to go up, what the government and all of you need at this moment that you can go up in the next 5 years from 39 to somewhere else? What should be the target? Mr. Kalsi or Mr. Anybody can take that question.
First thing is that there is a focus on multimodal logistics, and here the first thing that comes to our mind is encouraging railways more than the road travel, because it is green. Number one, causes less pollution. Number two, it is supposed to be faster because the movement has to be say seamless. And number three, it reduces huge congestion that is occurring on our roads and reduces the accidents as well. So here we have a concern that number one, that the speed of the cargo that travels by road is relatively much slower. Now in Japan, I have seen there are exclusive tracks on which the goods trains go on moving without any stops en route. So from point A to B, between passenger train and goods train, if we consider, the goods train reaches faster, reaches in lesser time, while India, the phenomena is reverse. Here, goods train is made to stop even for 8 hours.
Mr. Kalsi, we have been talking about a freight corridor for the last 20 years. I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Amitabh Kant got into central government because he was known to be expert on freight corridors. I don't know what happened to those freight corridors for which he was made the CEO. I don't know whether it started or not.
That's right.
Anyway, you are right that we have been moving very slow on the freight corridor.
We are all eagerly waiting for that, sir. So,
you will wait after that.
And second thing, from our auto perspective, I would like to say that railways have to create huge auto handling terminals, at the loading point and at the destination point. Nevertheless, the action has started in that direction, and we were, say, doing about 8% vehicle transportation by railways earlier. And in a span of just 3 years, it is 15%. And over next 3 years, We intend to go to 30% by railways. But biggest concern as of now is lack of infrastructure at the loading and destination points. So that infrastructure is very important. And then of course the speed. Second point is about, say, alternate system of, say, waterways. Now, waterways, again, similar problem of infrastructure comes. Then the dredging of the rivers is very important. The ships which will be deployed, they may not get that kind of a draft there, that kind of, say, water depth. That's another problem. And then loading, unloading points, again, we would need infrastructure to park the vehicles in a safe manner and also to unload the vehicles. And again, say, safety of the vehicles will be very important in those areas. Likewise, say we have a huge coastline. Now, if the manufacturing plants are, say, located along the coastline, then from, say, one side to another side, that movement may be possible. But again, it has to be supported by, say, proper infrastructure. Now, think of a situation of a company like Maruti, where we produce the vehicles at Gurgaon. Now, suppose we take it to the port. So that has to be by road. And then again, we have to do unloading, again loading, then at the destination point, loading, unloading, then last mile again by road. So the handling of the vehicles at so many places leads to problems. Some dents, some scratches, safety.
You are going to near the port in Gujarat now.
Yes, yes. So once that comes, certainly things would be, this thing maybe a little more smooth. But these are some of the challenges. Likewise, we have to make our road transport more user-friendly. Today, the drivers, when they take the cargoes, take the vehicles or components, they are the most harassed lot on the road. Right. They are harassed at the borders. They are harassed en route by various enforcing agencies. So even if everything is, say, they are meeting all the requirements, still, inspectorate finds some problem or the other to, this thing, put heavy penalties on them. Then cross-border movement from state to state. There are delays, vehicles are held up there. Different states have different entry taxes, which are, causing problems. Now, when we travel in Europe, we don't even get to know when we move from one country to another country. Now, here within our own country, we are stopped, at every state border. And there are problems, more such, say, borders or barriers are created, more would be the, say, scope for corruption, more will be the scope for, say, harassment of the, say, users of the road. So we have to look into all those things. Government of India is certainly taking initiatives. Say, FASTag, I would like to say, has definitely helped. It has enhanced the, capacity or the efficiency of the fleet. Earlier, our trucks were moving, say, around 300 kilometers a day. Today, they can move 450 kilometers a day. So technology solutions certainly are helping. But we have a long way to go to have that seamless movement that a truck starts from Kashmir, right up to Kanyakumari, it goes undisturbed up to its destination. So we are waiting for that day. So these are some of the areas where we need to improve a lot, and we have a long way to go. That's my viewpoint on this.
Right. Maybe Mr. Agarwal, you could,
no, I think, we have not spoken to cargo exchange because there's the best people to tell us.
Mr. Icharapu,
what to be done.
Yeah. So basically, sir, we from the technology perspective, right? So we always talk saying that let's say container shortage is there. So one way is to building the capacity of the container. So that is like done by the heavy lifters. But from a technology perspective, if we can have a visibility solution, something like which Carvection runs as a empty container visibility marketplace, where people can even understand where the containers are lying today. And they can actually, if required, the repositioning can also be done with their containers, right? Same way, like it's all about the visibility, where the trucks are, where the supply is, and where the demand is. How do we match the demand and supply so that we get a better solution, better output of that, right? At the same time, certain recommendations for the optimal model mix. Let's say when a cargo moves by road, and the same cargo can also be moved by coastal shipping. Right, and maybe it may be 30% more cheaper than by moving by coastal shipping, but a lot of people doesn't know. Means the comparison factor, the fleet benchmarking has to be done with respect to coastal shipping versus by road versus by rail, so that people can even understand saying that what is the time taken and what is the cost, and then they can decide saying that maybe I am moving tires today. So that is my coastal shipping might be much appropriate for me because they are not going to, nothing is going to happen to my tires after, even if it reaches after 1 month actually. But at the same time, if mine is an FMCG products and I need to move it, so there may be by road may be the better solution for that particular thing. So that kind of solutions, analytical tools, performance monitoring tools has to come up, and we are sitting on a huge set of data. So that is very important, right? A lot of data is there across India with different players, and it is being worked out in silos actually. If we can integrate this data, bring it together, and showcase to the entire industry, we can definitely move our LPI index into a single digit as soon as fast actually. So that's our idea from that perspective.
Mr. Das, what are your solutions? What are your expectations? How to go up in the LPI?
So I think, sir, both the things Mr. Kalsi actually explained it very nicely. So yes, multimodal, I will touch upon that. And then what additional I feel is, I will say that is in multimodal, we have been talking about multimodal has to be there. And there are some infrastructure being created. All that is fine. What we should also enable is multimodal for various different types of categories of commodities and for irrespective of whether it is moving domestic or international. So there are different benchmarks which are available across the world, how it is done. Like when Vineet mentioned it is 63% as of now as in road. Ideally, if you ask me, the needle should be on the other side. For India, it should be 63% on the railway side. That's the ideal. For us, our kind of a industry where we are heavily dependent on railways, we look at that as a goal to move towards that as an index. Currently, as we speak, we are around 50%, which is not bad per se. But that has happened over 2-3 years of last pandemic where we didn't have a choice and we were forced to think it that way. And we pushed railways as well to give us those incentives and benefits to move around those places. So I think that incentivization is very important. How do you make a person utilize that space in terms of that mode? Second was on digitization. Mr. Kalsi mentioned about the road part on the FASTag. Yes, the FASTag was a fabulous, I would say, engagement. But now it has to be taken ahead, I feel. We should try and utilize this, how we can imbibe all the documents into a FASTag. Today, we are only utilizing for the tolls. How you can add on documents to it? How can that one single solution be a part of the entire journey for the truck driver? Is that possible? I think that's possible. The last point, is on the shipping side. Like Srihari mentioned about the containerization and the digitization which is available there. I feel the documentation is huge on the shipping side, on the exim side of our logistics. That needs to be brought under blockchain. Something has to be thought about it. We have to cursively do something about it because during the pandemic, it was a huge problem to ensure documents move. Forget products, the documents which had to move through banks or somewhere, it was really problematic. So it's high time that we think and enable those technologies for users to utilize those.
Right, sir.
I have a answer. So we have recently... sorry, go ahead, please.
So I just wanted to tell Mr. Das saying that we have recently launched the Secure Logistic Document Exchange platform along with Ministry of Commerce Logistic Division. This is about, it's a blockchain enabled platform where all logistic related documents can be exchanged on it. It includes banks, it will include logistic service users, providers. We also have like a integration with customs, IPA, so that all stakeholders can get all the documents at one place. It will manage the title of ownership and also it will manage the authenticity of the documents also. So that's what I want to do.
Excellent.
Is it in operation or does it is it yet to be?
Last Friday, it was launched as a beta version for testing to all the stakeholders. So POCs was done with all the national and international banks actually, and also with few of the logistic service users and also providers.
When can we see this fully operational?
Mr. Agarwal should be able to answer.
That POC has to be, means once the beta testing and the feedback comes from the industry, it depends upon how do we actually launch it?
Right.
Mr. Agarwal will be able to tell us whether it is coming up, and he must have tried it, whether it is working or not. Documentation is a big thing, because Mr. Kalsi was mentioning that we move from one state to another.
Yeah,
so many
that's
documents. Right. I don't know how GST helped or not in this, reducing this kind of harassment. Earlier, too many chungis or too many things are happening. Mr. Agarwal, tell us whether this, what he's talking about, it is irrigation, but it will not help documentation. One is the privacy of the data, of course, competitive word, it is not stolen or whatever, what has happened. But is it happening? Have you tested it?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what Srihari mentioned over here is that it's a lot of work has already happened on that. Let's see, as you rightly mentioned about GST, I think that was one of the ways that things started formalizing in our economy more forcefully. And that's where the digitization of documentation also started. The journey with e-way bills and now e-invoicing, and now the requirement that all documentation has to be electronic will mean that ultimately it should not be on anyone's discretion to stop the truck. There has to be a reason. And if you have to stop the truck, nowadays we are seeing they're actually scanning the truck number and checking, acha, what are you carrying? We know what you're carrying now. So it's becoming quite formal, but it has to be adapted and adopted nationally. And that's a process that's obviously with something like this takes a little longer time. GST itself, as you know, is a very, very complex subject. And there are people who are trying to either one side claim too much GST and one side not pay any GST. So you have to, there are all kinds of players in our country. So we have to keep that balancing act and get this activated as soon as possible for the formalization of the economy.
Right. There's a comment from Vikas Apte to everyone. I'd just like to read that out. EDFC and WDFC are progressing, improving, and have contributed greatly to major increase in freight movement during the pandemic. Once completed in totality, this will surely change the way the logistics business will be done in the future, and the horizon is near by 2023. His other comment is that blockchain technology for document management and control is amazing to hear. This will surely improve things. Any comments on the first comment on EDFC and WDFC and how it's progressing, Mr. Agarwal?
I think Mr. Kalsi also mentioned that the DFC, the dedicated freight corridor on the eastern side and the western side, it started, some operations have started already on it. So very hopeful that this will be a game-changing thing for the logistics industry.
Mr. Chawla, are you happy to hear that?
My experience, because they won't say, but my experience is okay. Let us see. Something has started, so let it start. So I won't comment anything else. But I just want to look at the various things they were talking about, railways and whatnot. Don't you think that privatization of railways, particularly for the freight part of it, will be helpful in improving your standing in the world in terms of movement of goods?
To some extent, I think privatization is one of the areas, but it's also very capex heavy. So government front loads certain types of capex will help to build the infrastructure, base infrastructure, and then of course privatize. So the talks around the DFC also about certain private trains running, etc., is all going to happen. So yes, we are moving in the right direction. As you rightly said, it needs to be executed. So we know that one section from Rewari to Palanpur is already active, and the rest of the other sections are under construction. And again, I think in our country, we have to have hope, and we have to be very, very optimistic if you're looking at the challenges that we have.
So one thing which we have not spoken much, Kaveree, we spent a couple of minutes on that now. We don't have enough time. Warehousing, for example. Cold chains were there. Of course, cold chains is how many cold chains in terms of what we need for the country, how much is available or not, we don't know. But in terms of warehousing, also shortages are there. Because warehousing earlier was only to keep the food grains which were eaten away by the rats later on. I have done the stories on food corruption, India warehousing. Right. So what do you suggest? Because logistics and warehousing go together. unless you have a break-in point where the break of the goods and service you carry somewhere, store somewhere, then move there from there. What do you think should be done to increase the warehousing policy? Because it involves, it is state subject, central warehousing corporation. You don't know what is happening to that. So you don't know what is happening to Food Corporation India warehouses, because they utilized or not. What do you think? How can we organize better warehousing throughout the country and you have seamless movement of goods?
My 2 cents on this, sir, is that I think the industry is changing very rapidly, and we are seeing huge amount of development of modern warehouses, specifically because companies in the e-commerce space sector have pushed a lot of change. So I think it's a sunrise sector, and a lot of investment, global investment, is coming into this area. So it is a big change that you are seeing. And I think the FCI kind of warehouses are also evolving to silos in many places. So that, and at the port level, we see a lot of storage available, both for chemical kind of logistics, chemical storage. So we have to look at warehousing not just from a godown, but from something that stores something. And that could be a chemical, that could be a food grain, that could be an e-commerce item, that could be an FMCG item. So that the whole evolution of this industry has started and is actually rapidly picking up.
Right. Mr. Icharapu, would you like to jump in on this, weigh in on this?
My 2 cents here, see, again, the aggregation of data has to happen with respect to warehouses, right? A lot of warehouses are empty on one side of the country, and a lot of warehouses are available on the other side. Means the demand and supply mismatch is still there, actually.
Right.
And
I know that because most of the warehousing which e-commerce companies are hiring, they are hiring around the metros. So the big warehouses are coming in Gurgaon and near Bombay. They are not anywhere in the rural areas or set places, because they are also going by the demand, where the demand is, and they can move the services.
Right.
The equitable distribution of logistics and warehouses is also required in India.
I think we need to move closer to the usage points. So from centralized warehousing to, say, decentralized, where the actual use is. So that is very important, and we have to move beyond these, major, say, 10 to 12 cities, go closer to, say, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and it will also not only, say, speed up the time of response. It will also lead to efficient management of those stores, and also the land prices would be much cheaper there. While in the bigger cities, land prices are very, very high. And then suppose you are producing, say, vegetables, fruits, then cold chains can be closer to those farms where they produce it, store it, and then go on distributing it as and when required. So that kind of a model, I think, hub and spoke model on warehousing is very important moving forward.
Great. Any other question, Mr. Chawla?
No, I have asked my question.
Yeah, I think we had a most entertaining and enlightening discussion, and really it's quite remarkable how all 4 of you gave us such a wonderful perspective on how India moves in a way and how India should move forward. So thank you, gentlemen, for being with us, and all the very best. You're also the silent heroes of this pandemic, and going forward in the new normal, I hope a lot more attention is paid to this area. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal. Thank you, Mr. Das. Thank you, Mr. Srihari. Thank you, Mr. Kalsi. Thank you, Mr. Chawla. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.